Welcome to Magic Arcanum. I'm Ryan Gomez. Behind the scenes is Nicole Burdick, and we're so glad you're here because it's story time. March of the Machine, The Aftermath, is a very interesting thing. It's a set of cards that goes into Standard, but it's smaller than any regular release, and it has a story that ties up some loose ends, while also setting the stage for future adventures. That gives us a lot to unpack in this 50-card micro expansion. And so today, I'm going to start by going over what happens in the Aftermath story, which is just 2 chapters long. But first, how about you expand your wardrobe with a little help from Into the AM? New graphic tee designs just dropped, and if you've got a favorite Magic card or character, you can definitely find something from Into the AM that has the same vibe. Not only will you achieve a harmonious style, it'll be the most comfortable and best fitting shirt in your collection. Using promo code MAGICARCANUM saves you 10% at checkout, and that stacks with their sales, which happen all the time. Seriously, you should pause this and go see if there's one right now, because there probably is. Into the AM helps me stay inspired to share the stories behind your favorite cards, so check them out using my link down below and you'll be supporting the show while turning yourself into the best dressed wizard at your next game night. Alright, now let's talk about what happens in March of the Machine, The Aftermath. As I said before, this story is just 2 chapters long, each following a different character and location, effectively making them feel like additional side stories for March of the Machine. The first is called She Who Breaks the World, and it opens with Nissa digging her own grave on Zhalfir. A quick reminder, Nissa was healed from her Phyrexian infection, and Zhalfir has taken Mirrodin's place in the multiverse and even inherited its 5 colored suns. They're not out right now though, because it's nighttime, and Nissa is using the cover of darkness to deal with something embarrassing. Apparently, after Elesh Norn was defeated and her oil was rendered inert and Nissa was purified by Malira's magic, she still had a sort of copper exoskeleton, which her friends helped her remove, and they forgave her for everything she did while under Phyrexia's control. So now Nissa is digging a grave to bury this portion of her formerly complete body. And as she does so, we learn that she has also lost the ability to planeswalk. It's not just her. Teferi and Koth are also presently stuck on Zhalfir, along with Karn, who willingly gave up his spark to save Nissa and Ajani. Ajani is still able to planeswalk, and so is Chandra, which leaves Nissa feeling more isolated than she's ever been. Even Zhalfir, the plane itself, refuses to connect with her, making her wonder if her animist powers are also gone. The story does not give us a clear reason why this has happened. Characters only offer speculation, and the most widely accepted theory is that Elspeth taking the exploding Silex into the Blind Eternities had something to do with it. Either that, or Realmbreaker punching holes all over the place has caused serious damage to the multiverse, which prompted a sort of great pruning as the Blind Eternities reclaims the power it needs to fill the gaps. Nissa ultimately decides it doesn't really matter why things are this way, it's just her fate now, and she channels her frustration into digging a hole big enough to hold the metal shell that briefly housed her own body. Chandra shows up and tries to encourage Nissa to come join a late-night party, but Nissa isn't in the mood and would rather focus on finishing the burial ceremony when Chandra tells her she's going to be leaving soon, and this might be their last chance to hang out before she's gone for a while. Chandra has it in her head that she has got to go find Ajani, who planeswalked away from Zhalfir shortly after recovering from being saved at the end of the March of the Machine story. She figures as one of the last remaining planeswalkers, it's up to her to find out where he went and bring him back here. Nissa is unhappy with this for a couple of reasons. Number one, she's mad she can't planeswalk herself anymore, and doesn't exactly feel at home here on Zhalfir, where everyone continues to be pretty nice to her, even though she recently had been trying to kill them. And number 2, Nissa has confessed that Chandra is everything to her. And so for her to just up and leave makes Nissa wonder if Chandra feels the same way back. Chandra tries to explain that she does love Nissa, but still feels compelled to seek out Ajani, and she wishes Nissa would try a little harder to embrace her life here on Zhalfir before she planeswalks away. The next day, Nissa tries meditation next to Ren's sapperling, which is growing fast under the 5 suns of Zhalfir. Nissa only spoke to Ren one time, but she feels a kinship with the Dryad, as the only other character to connect with Realmbreaker and feel the power of the multiverse flowing through its limbs. Reflecting on this experience causes Nissa to have an intense vision of all of the bonds she ever made as Worldwaker, and it overwhelms her to the point that she passes out. She wakes up and discovers a rip in the nearby sky, like someone stuck a knife into reality itself. Before she can make sense of it, a creature pops out, crackling with energy and looking quite angry. Nissa realizes she's the only thing between this creature and the nearby village, and while she's not a planeswalker anymore, she still thinks of herself as a defender of the innocent, so she tries to stop the mysterious invader. The two fight, and Nissa starts to wonder if this is actually an elemental, perhaps sent by Zhalfir to punish her or something, and it's about to get the better of her when she's saved suddenly by Teferi, Koth, and Karn. Karn takes a turn wrestling with the creature, but it breaks away and runs for the hills with storm clouds trailing behind it. Teferi tends to the dazed Nissa, then notices the rip in the sky, which has become a full-sized portal, big enough for any of them to walk through. Nissa feels compelled to step through and see where it leads, but Teferi says it's too dangerous, and Koth reminds everyone that the creature is still loose and threatens the peaceful existence of Zhalfir, so he proposes they deal with that first, then figure out what to do about the portal. First, though, Nissa must recover from her battle, so she rests up at the healer's tent while the others go searching for the creature. Wouldn't you know it, the creature arrives at the village where Nissa is, once again making her wonder if this thing has something personal against her. She lures it away from the village and quickly finds herself outmatched for a second time. Fortunately, Chandra arrives and starts throwing fire around, which gets the creature's attention. This gives Nissa a chance to retry her animist powers, and she awakens a tree and sends it to attack the creature, but it gets burned up by Chandra's fire. The two are not working well together, and the creature takes advantage of this by charging at them, which forces the women to dive into the hole in the ground where the tree had been. In this moment of shelter, the two talk and realize how important they are to each other. Inspired by their reforged bond, they try to brainstorm a way to deal with the creature, who is now trying to force its way down into their hiding spot. Nissa tells Chandra she's cut off from the plane's ley lines, probably because of all the bad stuff she's done. And Chandra's like, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense. You probably just need to accept things are different now and stop trying to act like they're not. With this in mind, Nissa tries again to speak to Zhalfir, and she realizes the plane is also struggling to accept its new place in the multiverse. Together, they come to a sort of understanding of each other, and the plane forgives Nissa for her role in the Phyrexian invasion. This unlocks Nissa's connection to the ley lines, which she funnels into Chandra, echoing how they defeated the Eldrazi back on Zendikar. As the creature absorbs the heat from Chandra's magic, it expands and finally breaks apart, becoming a giant, smiling storm cloud, happy to release the elemental energies now coursing through itself. This brings a warm and refreshing rain down, and Chandra and Nissa enjoy a romantic kiss together as they celebrate their victory. We jump ahead a bit as the pair stands before that portal from earlier. Nissa says she can hear Zendikar somewhere out there, faint, but calling her home. She's a little nervous about the journey, but Chandra comforts her and says she'll be her torch, and they step through the swirling portal together and enter the unknown. The second story chapter is called Beyond Repair, and it takes place exactly where Nissa is hoping to end up, on Zendikar. Things open with Nahiri, who has survived the fall of the Ameria Skyclave, but is presently trapped within the ruins of the structure and is attempting to dig her way out. There is a poetic symmetry here with Nissa's story. Both characters reflect on their time as a Phyrexian while digging, and both have to come to terms with losing their spark. Yeah, while Nahiri has survived, she too has found she's no longer a planeswalker, and so she must excavate her way out of the crumbling stone tomb in which she currently resides. How is she alive? You're not going to believe this, but the story only offers up theories. Nahiri thinks the sudden blast of halo she received right as the oil was going offline made it possible, and she entertains the idea that others might have survived in a similar fashion. If that ends up being true, it would not only greatly diminish the impact of seeing some of our favorite characters fall to the Phyrexians, but it would outright contradict the story, where Angels already told us Halo itself is only a protective measure and not actually a cure. Nahiri also considers the power of the ancient Skyclave itself might have shielded her since she was fused with it during her final battle against Linvala and the rest, but ultimately we don't get an answer for how she's alive or how she got her hands back. The story only says she spent considerable time healing from her wounds and picking the remaining metal bits out of her own flesh, which left her with an assortment of scars. This only slows her down a little, and then, with grim determination, she commits herself to cleaning up the Skyclave, one handful of twisted metal at a time, if that's what it takes. She digs through more and more of the ruins, convinced that the layers of metal she keeps finding are actually protecting something, and sure enough, she eventually comes to a small hedron embedded in one of the walls. She realizes it contains her spark, which must have left her body when she bonded with the Skyclave in this very room. Holding the hedron gently, she uses what remains of her lithomancer powers to punch a hole in the ceiling and elevate herself upward. She reaches the top of the Skyclave, and from there, she can see the surrounding land of Zendikar, and she realizes that the corruption of the Phyrexians spreads as far as she can see in every direction. She feels guilty about this, since it was her efforts within the Skyclave that allowed the Phyrexians to so aggressively assault her home, so she figures if she has any hope of fixing things, it will start with getting this spark back inside herself. Before she can get far with that, though, a Johnny suddenly planeswalks into the scene. He says he is surprised to find Nahiri here alive because the others are dead. And then he clarifies what he means by the others. It's Tamiyo and Luca, and he assumes Jason Vraska as well, even though nobody has found their bodies yet. So really just the two completed planeswalkers we knew about from the March of the Machines story. No new information here. Ajani goes on to pitch an idea to Nahiri. He thinks the two of them should work together to try and undo the damage done to the multiverse. He wants them to make amends for their time as Phyrexians. Nahiri, however, is incredibly skeptical. She thinks this is all a trap and believes Ajani is actually here to kill her. Character-wise, Nahiri cannot understand why someone would dwell on their time as a Phyrexian. Ajani continues to insist they work together because they owe it to the multiverse, and Nahiri would rather put it behind her and focus on just fixing Zendikar as soon as she gets her spark back. Nahiri then realizes Ajani didn't actually tell her how Tamiyo and Luca died, which makes her even more sure Ajani is here to kill her, because after all, he was one of Elesh Norn's most loyal followers, and if he hadn't killed Jaya and told the Phyrexians how to prepare for the rest of the Planeswalkers, maybe they would have stopped the invasion before it started. So, Nahiri says some provoking words, and Ajani extends his claws. She is famous for overreacting to perceived slights against her, and here it is no different. The only problem is, Ajani is still a legit planeswalker and seems to be operating at full strength, while Nahiri is a mess from digging her way out of the Skyclave and is still holding the Hedron that contains her spark in her offhand. She tries to pull up part of the Skyclave's exterior to make a barrier between herself and Ajani, but she overdoes it and falls into the gaping hole she creates. To her own surprise, she survives a very long fall, but the Hedron is shattered and her spark is gone. She crawls all the way back to the top of the Skyclave and finds no trace of Ajani, and she decides all planeswalkers do is meddle in the affairs of places they have no right being. She knows this better than anyone. She used to do it herself. But now, she's not a planeswalker anymore, so she gets to use the white half of her identity to create a new rule that she won't have to follow. She declares never again will a planeswalker set foot on Zendikar. She names herself the Plains Guardian and swears no planeswalker will ever harm her beloved home again. To recap, Nissa buries the remains of her Phyrexian form, defends Zhalfir from a wild elemental, and braves an omen path with Chandra as she searches for her way back home. Meanwhile, on Zendikar, Nahiri also tries to distance herself from her Phyrexian identity, and she almost recovers her lost spark before Ajani arrives and she interprets his offer of help as a trap. She then pledges to keep her home free from further planeswalker interference. And that's it. That's what happens in March of the Machine, The Aftermath. Normally, I would illustrate a story like this using the set's matching story spotlight cards, but for the 50-card expansion that is The Aftermath, there are no dedicated story spotlight cards. Instead, each card is meant to tell us something important, and I will cover most of them in a future video. So for today, our question is really, what did Wizards of the Coast want us to get from these two written stories? There is some low-hanging fruit, obviously. We know some planeswalkers have apparently lost their spark and can no longer travel through the blind eternities. We don't have a full list of who was affected, but I'm sure that's intentional, and learning the fates of Magic's huge roster of characters will keep us busy for the next several sets. We have also learned that omen paths now exist across the multiverse. These are portals that were first seen on Kaldheim, but now appear at random and connect various planes together. They're clearly a side effect of Realmbreaker's branches, and their unpredictable nature will definitely make them a key part of the Magic story going forward. But beyond all of that, we are left with two stories that really tell one story, and that is how a character deals with change. Despite their differences in magical affinities, Nissa and Nahiri are quite similar, and so it is interesting to see how the end of March of the Machine affected each of them. Nissa agrees to brave the unknown, and she's able to do that by drawing strength from the friends around her. She makes peace with Zhalfir and regains some of her powers by taking Chandra's advice and embracing the fact that the multiverse and her place in it have changed. She does still struggle to understand how Chandra can love so many people so freely, but she's willing to explore their relationship as they work together to bring Nissa back to Zendikar, where she'll feel at home. Nahiri, on the other hand, closes off to the outside completely. The story reminds us she really has no friends, and she even pushes back Ajani when he comes to her and offers to collaborate on making amends across the multiverse. Instead of looking outward to others, Nahiri focuses inward and decides to help where she is, while Nissa pledges to help where she can. Both saw the damage done by the Phyrexian invasion and made their own plan for dealing with it, and this has actually set them on a collision course yet again. It's like Nissa and Nahiri are the Batman and Joker of Magic. They're just destined to do this forever, aren't they? Anyway, both characters have confronted the Eldrazi, become a Phyrexian, and fought to become the Guardian of Zendikar. With such an overlapping history, I think it was an inspired choice to have them be the lenses through which we explored the aftermath. And this is what makes the Magic story great. With so many characters representing so many different points of view, these tales can inspire us on our own journeys. So, the next time you face something challenging in your life, will you be a Nissa and look outward for support? Or will you be a Nahiri and trust your own strength to carry you through? I don't think either of those is necessarily the right or wrong way to go about it, but as always, I am curious to hear what you think. So let me know down in the comments, and check out my link for Into the AM while you're there. Then make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the great stories you'll only find here on Magic Arcanum. We'll see ya!